It's Tuesday, it's the 24th of June. You're watching ARIRANG Korea's only global network. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Gun-young. President Park is 0 for 2 in nominations for Prime Minister over the past month. Her latest pick, Chang-keuk, stepped aside early this morning amid criticism over some controversial remarks he made a few years back. Arirang News Choi You-sun starts us off.
Another one of President Park's prime minister nominees has withdrawn before a confirmation hearing, dealing a heavy blow to the president's running of state affairs.
I came to a conclusion that I would be helping President Park by stepping down at this point in time. Today, I'm resigning as the prime minister nominee.
Tuesday's announcement was widely expected after President Park last week delayed a motion to Parliament for a confirmation hearing on the nominee. Chang-keuk drew heavy criticism from the public and the ruling and opposition parties for comments he made at his church a few years ago. Moon had said Japan's colonization of the Korean peninsula was part of God's plan to awaken the Korean people, and that he also divided the two Koreas to prevent communism from settling in the south. Before announcing his resignation, Moon, however, stood by his previous defense that his comments were distorted after broadcaster KBS only aired portions of them.
Every individual enjoys freedom of religion. That is a precious basic right. What is wrong with what I said according to my religious beliefs before my nomination?
To politicians on both sides of the aisle that demanded he withdraw, Moon said it is the parliament's duty to govern by law and not by public opinion. Following Moon's announcement, President Park expressed regret that the nominee has missed the chance of public judgment at a hearing. President Park's previous nominee, An Dae-hee, stepped down last month amid allegations he accepted privileges and high earnings in the private sector after retiring as a Supreme Court justice. Her first prime minister nominee, named before she took office, Kim Yong-jun, resigned from allegations of real estate speculation and ethical lapses. Choi You-sun, Arirang News.
Slowly but surely, President Park and his recent nominees for key cabinet posts are making their way towards confirmation hearings. The presidential office on this Tuesday formally asked the National Assembly to hold hearings for 8 cabinet-level designates and the chief of the National Intelligence Service. But as our Kim Young-gu reports, the presidential office would like its pick for finance minister in office sooner rather than later.
President Park Geun-hye approved the request for confirmation hearings for 8 newly nominated cabinet ministers on Tuesday, giving the National Assembly up to 20 days to conclude them. For the presidential office, confirmation can't come soon enough, particularly for Finance Minister nominee Choi You-sun. A leadership vacuum exists in the economic sector, and the government is worried about lost time as the economy is gripped by fears of a double-dip recession amid slumping domestic demand. Korean consumers are increasingly reluctant to open their wallets, and businesses are shying away from massive investment. Experts say exports could falter if the strengthening of the Korean won continues unabated. The problems underscore the importance of having a finance minister in place, someone who can come up with an extra budget and influence monetary policies. Plans to reform the overall regulatory system, overhaul debt-ridden public enterprises, and boost domestic demand are likely to remain stalled until a new finance minister is installed. The presidential office of Cheong-wa-dae hopes that person is nominee Choi You-sun, whose close ties with the president stand to help him push through major policies. But his nomination remains in limbo due to differences among government agencies and a lack of cooperation from the National Assembly. Choi You-sun, Arirang News.
Now, on this Tuesday, another victim has recovered from the sunken Solo ferry, bringing the confirmed death toll from the disaster to 293. 11 others remain unaccounted for, 70 days after the ferry sank in waters off southwestern coast of Korea. Now, officials say the body is that of a female student, and she was recovered from the 4th floor of the sunken vessel. The body has been moved to a temporary chapel located in Pyeongmogang Harbor. DNA testing will be used for identification as her body has badly decomposed. Divers will resume their search of the ferry once tidal conditions improve.
When the latest news meets the latest business stories, we give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Business Today with Moon Gon-young. Every weekday, only on Arirang.
Now, South Korea has been operating a provincial reconstruction team in the war-scarred nation of Afghanistan for roughly 4 years now. But on Monday, its mission came to a close. The group has educated and provided medical assistance to thousands of Afghan citizens. Arirang News' Hwang Sung-hee filed us this report from Afghanistan.
Ramat Bibi says she was devastated when doctors in Afghanistan said her heart disease could not be cured. She received surgery at the Korean hospital in Bagram airfield 1 month ago and is now waiting to return home.
I received medical treatment for 1 year, but I didn't get better. I'm so happy to have recovered here, and I can't wait to see my family.
Every day, around 250 Afghans like Ramat visit the Korean hospital in Bagram airfield. The hospital, one of the Korean provincial reconstruction team's reconstruction projects for Afghanistan, has treated some 150,000 Afghans over the last 4 years. The Vocational Training Center is another key project of the Korean PRT that has helped change the lives of people like Faisal Safi, a student turned teacher at the center's electricity department.
My life has completely changed since 4 or 5 years that I've been here. Because I'm an electrician, I can get a job very easily to support my family.
The Korean PRT, consisting of the government, the military, and the private sector, completed its mission in Afghanistan on Monday local time. Since 2010, it has dispatched a total of 2,500 personnel to share Korea's development experience in the fields of health, education, rural development, and governance.
We are the only aid recipient country to have turned into a donor country. This was clearly demonstrated in Afghanistan. Our activity has given hope to Afghans and became a source of pride for Koreans.
And while the PRT era has come to an end, Korea's mission to secure lasting stability in Afghanistan does not end here. The Korean hospital in Bagram airfield and the Vocational Training Center will remain open to assist those in need as Afghanistan continues its reconstruction efforts. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News, Bagram.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry landed in Iraq on Monday for talks with Iraqi leaders. Now, he met with leaders from both the Shiite and Sunni sides. This as militants continue their violent campaign to control large parts of the country, including Iraq's largest oil refinery. Shin Se-min reports.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry pledged intense support for the troubled Iraqi government against what he described as the existential threat of Islamist militants in the nation. Visiting Baghdad on Monday, Kerry pressed Iraqi leaders to put aside their sectarian differences to counter the Sunni insurgency, calling on the government to give more power to its political opponents. Kerry's visit comes as a militant group known as ISIL has gained control over vast territories in northern and western Iraq, including the nation's main oil refinery in north of Baghdad. Kerry, in a closed-door meeting with the country's Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki, as well as key Shia and Sunni figures, stressed that the future of Iraq rests on the decisions made in the coming days and weeks. In response, Kerry said Prime Minister Maliki reaffirmed his commitment to forming a new and more inclusive government by the 1st of July. Maliki also reportedly asked that Washington carry out airstrikes on key militant targets throughout Iraq and Syria. Kerry said a great deal of care and caution would be needed before any attack was launched, but promised support in other ways.
The support will be intense, sustained, and if Iraq's leaders take the necessary steps to bring the country together, it will be effective.
In the meantime, Washington appears to be resting its hopes on a peace deal between Iraq's Shiite-dominated government and Sunni rebels, although with ISIL now in control of large parts of Iraq, such a deal feels far off. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Well, for some teams, advancing out of the group stage at the World Cup involves complex scenarios and FIFA tiebreakers. For one team, advancing is quite simple and involves Neymar, doesn't it, Ji-sun?
Viva Brazil in Brasilia. The host nation crushed Cameroon 4-1 in their capital in their 100th World Cup game. And this one goes to squad superstar Neymar, whose double kept his country perched at the top of Group A. Neymar's goal in the 70th minute made another piece of history, as it was the 100th goal at this year's World Cup. After scoring 2 brilliant goals in the first half, Neymar was taken off in the second half to give him some rest before the next match. His fellow countrymen Fred and Fernandinho also got on the score sheet to give Brazil a convincing victory. Neymar is the top scorer at the moment with 4 goals. 5 other strikers, including Thomas Müller of Germany and Robin van Persie of the Netherlands, are closely behind with 3 goals each. Elsewhere in the group, Mexico beat Croatia 3-1 to advance to round of 16 for 6th consecutive time. Spain wrapped up their World Cup with a 3-0 victory over Australia. Both of them now have a long flight home to think about. After already having secured their spots in the second stage, the Netherlands beat Chile 2-0, which means they avoid going up against Brazil in the last 16. The knockout stage kicks off this weekend, starting with Brazil and Chile facing off at Belo Horizonte at 1 p.m. local time on Saturday. And Mexico and the Netherlands will hold their match at Fortaleza at the same time on Sunday. As you can see, teams from Latin America are currently outperforming the rest. European squad, on the other hand, Croatia, England, Spain, and Bosnia-Herzegovina will be packing their bags and flying across the Atlantic in the coming days. Now checking the group standings on this Tuesday with just 1 match left for the remaining groups. And here's a look at today's games. The verdict will be out for Group C and D on this Tuesday. Tied on 3 points, Uruguay must beat Italy to advance from Group D. With just Colombia short to advance from Group C, it will be an all-out battle between Greece and Côte d'Ivoire to join them. And that was your look at the latest from the World Cup. I'll see you guys back here for more updates.
Korea was 13th in the world in terms of fund asset size in the fourth quarter of last year, this despite market volatility due to the tapering of stimulus measures in the United States. The Korea Financial Investment Association says that the nation's combined net asset value of stock and bond funds came to $285 billion at the end of last year. Now, Korea benefited by an increase in net asset values of funds with exposure to stocks in the U.S. and Europe. The net value of all global funds totaled $30 trillion in the fourth quarter of 2013, which is up 4% from the previous quarter. The U.S. topped the list at $15.2 trillion, followed by Luxembourg and Australia. Now, the largest net buyers of Korean shares over the past 6 months have come from China. Chinese investors have poured in nearly $1.4 billion over that period, and this is according to data by Hana Daewoo Securities. Now, ample liquidity and eased offshore investment regulations on the Chinese mainland are the main reasons for the surge as the Chinese economy remains stagnant. So long as those conditions persist, analysts expect the Chinese money to continue flowing into Korea. Well, the latest battle among major IT companies across the globe is being waged in the clouds. Microsoft announced plans on Monday to reduce prices and provide updates for its OneDrive cloud storage service, and they're going to double the amount of storage provided free of charge to 15 gigabytes. That puts OneDrive on par with competitors like Apple and Google. Not to be outdone, Apple is also slashing prices for its iCloud service by 70% and offering up to 20 gigabytes of storage for less than $1. Google Drive gives users 15 gigabytes of storage for free and offers 100 gigabytes for less than $2. Back here in this country, Korea's low birth rate is a widely acknowledged problem both domestically and internationally. While measures are being instituted to reverse the trend, new stats from May, which show the population of children in the nation at a new low, suggest they aren't working too well. Connie Kim reports.
The number of children born in Korea has dropped to a 42-year low. The public administration said Tuesday that there were 7.4 million children in the nation last month, the lowest level recorded since 1972. The ministry warned that if this trend continues, the total population will begin to dip in about 15 years as children today mature to marriage age. The total population is forecast to peak at 52.2 million in 2030 and then begin to decline. It's something that would no doubt have an effect on the Korean economy.
For instance, schools will be forced to undergo personal restructuring, and there will be a shortage in national defense resources as fewer people will be enlisted. It will also lead to fewer people in the labor market and an aging of the labor force. Overall, domestic demand will be unstable.
Senior citizens aged 65 and over now make up about 12% of the total population, but the number will rise considerably over the coming years. And while the total number of children currently exceeds that of senior citizens in the nation, that will change by the year 2017. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Well, Korea is a nation covered in apartments, so much so that from above it can resemble a coast-to-coast line of dominoes. Apartment buildings first sprouted decades ago as a way to accommodate Korea's booming middle class, and they were the picture of a nation in rapid ascent. Today, roughly 60% of the Korean population lives in apartments, which is why apartments are regarded as the backbone of Korea's housing market. And there is apparently a changing trend in the apartment market in this country. Let's take a closer look. Dr. Kim Byung-ju joins me live in the studio. Dr. Kim, a few days ago, the Research Institute at the KB Financial Group issued a new report summarizing the changing trend in Korea's apartment housing market. Right. And one key point I noticed was its argument that the market is now a heavily buyer-driven one.
Right, indeed. When the real estate market itself was very hot, whatever the suppliers would supply to the market, buyers would take it. But this time, now, as we have talked about all along, the real estate market here in Korea has changed big time. And now buyers can make their choices, and according to their choices and preferences, the market is increasingly segmented and differentiated to reflect different kinds of preferences of the people altogether. And in addition to that, of course, the changing demographics and then also changing family structure and changing tastes, as I mentioned. And all those different variables are being reflected in the market.
So we know that newly or recently built and smaller size apartments are gaining popularity, right?
Right. We knew this all along. And the thing is, new apartments, that's something new. I mean, the smaller apartments, they've been gaining, popularity. But new apartments, interesting thing is, up until the year 2000, I suppose, older apartments new apartments, their prices are about the same because all the apartments, they have merit. At that time, they had merit of having possibility to be redeveloped. So greater investment value there. But however, ever since year 2000, 2006 or so, things have changed, and new apartments are definitely more expensive these days. So it sort of reflects overall situation of the real estate market that we have talked about all along here. And the interesting thing is the larger apartments, they've lost their popularity, we know that, and the gap in terms of like per unit, per square meter price, the comparison between the smaller and the bigger apartments, it's getting bigger and bigger, meaning that smaller sizes are more expensive, reflecting the higher popularity.
Perhaps it's a shift of the mentality of seeing these apartments as an asset. So that was a traditional way of thinking, and now it's more of becoming a place to live rather than an asset. So that's probably, or mostly why. Now, for the past decade, high-rise apartments have become hugely popular. But now buyers are having second thoughts on that, and builders are also reacting to it.
That is a very interesting news because like about 10 years ago, or for the past several years, up until like a very recent time, Korea's high-rise apartments that are marking Korea's, the skylines here, they have been hugely popular. But now for the last year or two, I suppose, the buyers and consumers are increasingly aware that these apartments are costly in terms of maintenance fees, like because they consume a lot of electricity. That's because their windows cannot be opened fully in many cases. So during the summertime, these are like glasses that blocks them from outside, and that they have like greenhouse effect. So they have to turn their air conditioner up all the way. And that costs them a lot of money. And also, when these are built, there are common spaces that these residents have to pay for when they buy these apartments. And so the buyers are increasingly realizing that these apartments are not very cost effective at the time of purchase as well as during the time of living right there. So the popularity is going down. And actually, some of these very famous high-rise apartments, their unit price is actually approaching the regular, common, big brand name apartments, low-rise, around their vicinities. So that's a phenomenon that we could never dreamed of at the time when these high-rises were being introduced.
I remember when they were newly built, everyone with lots of money were actually rushing to buy apartments in that building. But right now, that's not the case anymore. We know that Korean consumers love brand names in general. And so do we see any change ahead for strong brand name preferences for apartments as well?
Well, what they're saying is, as you pointed out, Koreans love brand names for everything. Not only apartments, but, all the different kinds here.
Clothes and bags.
Exactly. And as the market situation changes in the real estate market, as I said before, in the past, whatever can be supplied, they could be bought by the buyers, but now buyers are becoming pickier about this because the market situation is changing. So what buyers are increasingly opting for are the brand name apartments. So they're saying the market is increasingly separated, and they're getting to all these different segmentations where different prices are being reflected depending on where you are, what kind of brand name apartments you're living in, and so on. So we can no longer talk about like average apartment housing prices anymore. Even in Seoul area, within same vicinities, depending on what kind of specific location within the vicinity you live and then what kind of brand name apartment you're living in, and the sizes and all that, you can't really tell the prices. You can generalize, you cannot generalize the prices. So it's an interesting development of the apartment, but overall what it reflects is the point that we shared at the beginning of this discussion, that is, it's increasingly becoming the buyer's market.
Right. Well, a change in perspective being reflected in the real estate market as well. All right, Dr. Kim Byung-ji, thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
The weather was nice and cool in Brazil for Monday's games, but things will take a turn tomorrow for Fortaleza and Natal, where rain and steamy temperatures are in the forecast. And as for the weather conditions here in Korea, it's currently raining in Gangwon-do and Chuncheon-do provinces, and we can also expect some strong winds and rain over in central region later on today. And it's been really hot and humid since the rainy days began, and today the daytime highs are about 4 degrees higher compared to yesterday with high humidity levels. Now going over to our temperature readings, Seoul will top out at 29 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will peak up to 27 and 26 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops out at 25, Dokdo at 22, while Mount Gungam tops out at 23. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and back to you, Kanyang.
Thanks, Michelle, for that. And that is your business today on this Tuesday. Thank you for watching, and do join us again at 6 p.m. Korea time, an early edition at 6.